Second, on return, I will develop an organization wherein all scientists relate all the physics and a unit was established temporary unit by ICMR to start with in the Department of Soil. The activity expanded to such an extent during the
A very good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second Dr. Ulhas Wagh Memorial Oration today. We will begin with a welcome address. I, uh, I would like to invite our Director in charge, Dr. Sharmila Bapat, to please deliver the welcome address and opening remarks.
Thank you, Jyoti. A very good morning to all of you. It's indeed an August gathering here today that I have the pleasure of welcoming. It's often said that visionaries actually build up from current realities. They look at future possibilities, and what's the most important is how they actually find solutions in the immediate present. I think Dr. Wagh, as we knew him, was that type of a personality. The staff here definitely had interactions with him. And on his passing away on 11th May 2022, we decided to have an Oration Award in his memory. To just give you a brief background of his achievements, Dr. Wagh was recognized as one of the leading cytogeneticists of India, and he had the opportunity to go as a visiting scientist at the Karolinska Institute in the lab of Professor Kasperson. In fact, who was actually a leading cytogeneticist and worked on UV-mediated binding techniques in cytogenetics. And one of the interesting things that Dr. Chiplunkar, who was an ex-faculty at NCCS, had told me about was how, as a researcher at the bench, he had done some staining with quinacrine and left it overnight under the laser. That resulted in discovery of R banding, or reverse banding as it is called. From G banding and Q banding, the discovery of R banding was not just a complementary step in cytogenetics, but it also still serves its purpose in studying things like telomeres. So that was something that he actually discovered. And however, his experience there actually prompted him not to take these discoveries ahead, but to come back and look at how an institute could be developed that would actually facilitate development of cell biology research in India. And it was with this thought, I think there was a clipping we had put up which reflected the last interview that he had given for one of the films made at NCCS. And he actually kind of recapitulated his thinking in putting forth his vision for having this type of a cell line repository that would cater to the needs of researchers all over India, in the industry as well as in academia. As a step towards this, he initiated a project that was titled the National Tissue Culture Facility, or the NTCF, within the Department of Zoology at the Pune University. And later on, this was registered as a society under the name of National Facility for Animal Tissue and Cell Culture, or NFATCC, which formally marked the inception of what is now recognized as National Center for Cell Science, a name that was brought about by Dr. G.C. Mishra, who's here today with us. Dr. Wagh's visions and actions were primarily driven by his strong conviction that science should help the common man. Under his leadership, India's first and unique animal cell facility was developed, established, as I just outlined before, and that apart from providing cell cultures, it was also realized that we need to train researchers in maintaining and planning out experimentation, an activity that we continue even today. And Dr. Poonam and Dr. Rahul Patil today, in fact, are conducting such a workshop that will go on for the next 4 days at NCCS. Dr. Wagh was also instrumental in introducing the concept of human tissue and organ banks way back in the mid-1980s. And this he achieved by supporting the development of medically useful technologies for long-term organ culture of human cornea, skin, and heart valves, bone marrow cryopreservations. And very importantly, these are all technologies that were transferred soon thereafter to several hospitals in Pune, in Delhi. And in fact, NCCS also supported the development of these facilities or these facilities elsewhere by even contributing not just the technologies and the intellect, but with facility development as well, infrastructure. After his retirement from the position of director, Dr. Wagh was also remained very active and continued to provide his guidance and support to help NCCS grow and flourish. He also established another institute called as IRSHA, which continued some of the activities and took them to a clinical level, especially the stem cell activities that were primarily established at NCCS. I think he was definitely a visionary, and I think this oration is very well received by the audience, as I can see. More so ever, I think today we have another visionary sitting with us, Dr. Rajesh S. Gokhale, who we are extremely fortunate to have to deliver the Oration Award despite his busy schedule. I know he's been juggling around a lot of meetings and possibilities since the last 2 or 3 months since he accepted our invitation, and it's really his commitment to NCCS and its growth and development, and we are really privileged to have him here today. We also are privileged to have several leaders from Pune, including Dr. Anand Deshpande, who's also the co-chair of the BRIC-NCCS governing body. We have Dr. Bhagwat, who's here. I think Dr. Dhake Farkar had also said, we have all the ex-directors of NCCS. I see Dr. G.C. Mishra, of course. We have Dr. Shekhar Mande here, and all the dignitaries here. I think it's a very befitting occasion for us to be here and remember the purpose with which this institute was started, and now take it ahead with the vision that Dr. Gokhale will slowly unwind and unfold to us in the next few minutes. Thank you all for your participation.
Thank you, Dr. Bapat. I would now like to request Dr. Raman Murthy to please introduce today's speaker.
Good morning to you all, and welcome to all the guests to NCCS. It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Professor Rajesh S. Gokhale. Professor Gokhale is the Secretary at the Department of Biotechnology in the Ministry of Science and Technology, Government of India. He is presently on deputation from the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, ISO Pune. Prior to this, he was at the National Institute of Immunology, NII, New Delhi, and was also the director of CSR Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology, CSR IGIB, for 7.5 years. During his tenure there, he established the South Campus of CSR IGIB, where he led interdisciplinary initiatives in translational genomics research programs focused in delineating a variety of complex diseases. Dr. Gokhale is trained as a chemical biologist from the prestigious Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and Stanford University, USA. His significant research contributions are in discovering novel metabolites and the pathways which dictate pathophysiology of human diseases. Recent work from his laboratory have identified two novel metabolites from infectious pathogen Mycobacterium tuberculosis that are crucial for initiating complex infection processes. His group has also significantly contributed to the understanding of autoimmune disease vitiligo. Studies from his group has elucidated complex interplay between metabolic reprogramming and immune system to develop novel therapeutic strategies that can tackle the underlying causes rather than just the symptoms. Scientific work from his laboratory has been published in prestigious journals like Nature Chemical Biology, Molecular Cell, the Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences, PNAs, etc. He has mentored more than 200 students, and about 25 students have completed PhD from his group. Dr. Gokhale co-founded Biome Biosciences in 2010, which is a biopharmaceutical company developing best-in-class drugs for dermatology. This company is presently completing phase 2B clinical trial for drug-resistant acne and has launched OTC products, over-the-counter products, in the market. Dr. Gokhale was a Wellcome Trust Fellow, Senior Research Fellow UK, and an International HHMI Fellow. He is a recipient of several prestigious awards. To name a few, the Infosys Prize, Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize, National Bioscience Award, J.C. Bose National Fellowship, and IIT Bombay Distinguished Alumni Award. He is also the Fellow of all the three National Science Academies. I hope I have done justice in this very brief introduction to Professor Gokhale. With these few words, I would like to invite him to kindly deliver the oration today. Dr. Gokhale, please.
I request Dr. Ramanmurthy to welcome Dr. Gokhale to the class. Come to the side.
Namaskar and a very good morning to all of you. Thank you, Professor Amla, and thank you, Dr. Ramanmurthy, for inviting me here for this wonderful lecture. The reason why I say wonderful is because I think it's associated with a name who stands very tall in front of all of us in terms of creating this amazing infrastructure and institution that has actually stand its time for several years. And I think in front of this august audience, people from all various diverse disciplines, including Dr. Anand Deshpande, who has had created such wonderful ecosystem in the country, Dr. Bhagwat, Dr. Mishra, Dr. Shekhar Mande, who gave this earlier lecture, if I'm not wrong, actually, if I remember. And I think it's always good to talk to people who have done this in different ways in different sectors of their life. And it feels privileged and humble to be able to be part of this journey, actually. So thank you very much for inviting me again. And I thought what I would try to give you is how Department of Biotechnology is trying to bring about biotech ecosystem as a forefront leader in the nation building. That is the most critical component of what our government is talking about, actually, is what we call Viksit Bharat. And when we were trying to think about its name, we were trying to come up with various names, and we thought the trilogy of Bollywood stories actually does become an interesting hit these days, actually. So we kind of gave it 1, 2, like that, kind of various coming. So we thought we give it E3 name, actually. And E3 really stands for 3 pillars of biotechnology that we all believe is likely to create the Viksit Bharat. The one is economy. Can we drive economy of the country such that this becomes one of the key aspect of bioeconomy, becomes a key aspect of Indian GDP growth? However, we need to ensure that the environmental problems are minimized
And at the same time, we need to make sure that the employment is generated for lots and lots of people, such that that feedback into the innovation ecosystem and that drives together the growth for the future of the country. And that's why we call it driving bio-innovation for Bharat as Bio-E3 policy. So first of all, let me congratulate first each one of you at NCCS here, because you deserve all the wonderful stuff what you have done. We always talk about leaderships, but really there are so many people behind it who makes it all happen. And they are the most critical one actually of all of you. And I think all of you are part of it. So let me say thank you very much for all of you for what you have done for these institutions, for Pune and for the country, and hopefully more and more for the world actually. And that's where we are trying to define about how to do this. So when I heard about Dr. Wagh, in fact, I've only heard about him. I've never had a chance to meet with him, incidentally. But it so happens that my wife has met them. And this was because my father-in-law, Dr. Shah, who used to have a biotech laboratories here, was also a zoologist and cytogeneticist. He had his own lab there. And I think they were close friends of each other. So my wife has some memories of meeting them. And when I was discussing with her, Dr. Bonde just mentioned to me right now that he knows my father-in-law and their family very well, actually. So I think it was amazing. I told my wife, and this is what she said, oh, you should certainly go and give that talk. And I had known only Dr. Wagh as a person who had a nature paper in India, actually. And beyond that, I don't think I have ever chance to meet with him. But, it's always wonderful to be part of understanding somebody's visionary leaderships and also the passion for research that drove so many exciting opportunities in India. And I think that's where we should all really, really feel fond of ourselves, of how much amazing we can, in fact, transform the world. And I always tell, we undermine ourselves by thinking, what is that we are all actually we should be feeling as a part of National Institute of part of a government of India, rather than just feeling an NCCS. NCCS is not for a simplistic case, the word given as national. The whole purpose of national is that you belong to the national scientific coterie, and so that your whole growth and your impressions that you put in during your time actually makes difference to the nation building as an important part of activity, actually. And I think that's where we all need to come out of our perfect ways of lives and really look at it. I thought, before going into visionary perspective of what the future holds, I thought it's always good to look back, and somewhere a little bit, it's always good to memorize how the world was, because it's very hard to imagine how the world will be. It's always very, very hard and very difficult, and very many people, will tell you lots of problems. Oh, come on, how can I do this? This was never possible to do. How can I do this? It's always, I thought it's a good to really think about. And this is a clip that from a serial in US that I got hold of. And it's really interesting to hear about, and then we can talk more about it, actually.
What is it wash? Blues. An electric motor spins the cylinder as water is pumped through the machine. So that in here, and the agitation removes any solidity.
What is that wash?
That's the refrigerator. Top compartment, the bottom compartment maintains the temperature at 38 degrees. We sell it, we rent them. So you sell electricity, and then you rent all the things that need electricity. More or less, we don't need any of these things. Well, the conveniences. Their use gives you time to do other things. What other things? Well, like other chores. You invent machines to do those, then what do we do? Go on a picnic. Go for a swim. Go to the cinema. You can enjoy more leisurely. You can more leisurely. As we got to work more to pay for all this stuff. These got to there. This is the future. Every home in New York City has electricity. They have refrigerators. And some even have electric stoves. And here's the thing. We buy all this stuff. We're not working for ourselves anymore. We're working for you.
So you can see it's a rather interesting clip that not very long back, if you really look at it, it's about 70 years back that this serial was actually being televised on the TV. And it's not it's quite amazing to really imagine simplest things of our lives like washing machine is thought to be really such an unimportant perspective from that point of view. And how electricity and electrical appliances, in fact, were getting into our lives and changing the lives of human behaviors. And you can imagine what we are today, if you really think of. And I think that's where our imagination really look at, one of the best way to look at the space technology, what SpaceX is doing right now from Elon Musk. So right now, I don't know how many of you had a chance to look at the video that BBC released yesterday for the chopstick maneuver. What that means is that every time a rocket goes up, the rocket actually comes back and lands in the boosters, and rockets all land back in the ocean. So what they were able to maneuver yesterday was to able to bring back the first booster of the rocket back into exactly the place where it started from, actually. You can imagine that you can retrieve now these boosters and rockets to be able to place back so that you can reuse them in an amazing speed and a cost that you can unimaginative about. Of course, the SpaceX is not only changing these, it's changing several technologies of what we are talking about. And therefore, the human imagination is what restricts what one can do actually in life. And that's where I think the biotech ecosystem really has to play a role in terms of how now that we have created such amazing capability and capacity in our country, how can we transform our common day lives into a perspective that is completely unique and different? And what does it require to do actually? But there are several important points that we want to deal with it. And one of the points that I would like to bring to your notice, because very often if I go to visit institution, the first thing I'm told, where do I get money? Who will solve this problem? Who will do this? Now, this is a problem that existed in all parts of the time, everywhere in the world, despite the fact that there are people who are able to do things actually. And despite all this, and that is where I thought I should talk to you about this very important book actually called Innovator's Dilemma. I don't know how many of you have read this, Clayton Christensen. And this is a rather interesting book actually. It talks about how innovation is always a dilemma of how it will serve the purpose. There are a few things that I picked up from this book, and it says that when new technologies causes great firms to fail. And the classical example is the photographic film Kodak, right? Many of you will say the Kodak was one of the famous companies actually and it did not adapt to the electronic way of imaging, and it obviously fell behind. So, but it's really true in all industries actually. The dilemma itself, and this is really going to be very, very true in biotech ecosystem, because biotechnology is largely going to replace technologies that exist today in a more sustainable way, in a more efficient way, and in a way that is actually far better for the rest of the future of the world. And so if you want to replace something and change the stuff, it's actually far more difficult because, and I will show you an example of this, why am I saying that's so difficult? So the dilemma itself in the fact that though large innovations have some motivation to innovate, they also have a strong disincentive from doing so as the new products will undermine their existing ones actually. And this is constantly the challenge that all industries face actually to be able to look at. And this is an example that is very good and that has happened in all of my lifetime actually. You can look at, this is the CDs, cassettes, and the MP3, and now you can see completely new way of music actually that you look at. So if you now see, CDs started to ferment while the cassettes were still dominant actually. However, not many people wanted to put in money into CDs. Don't wanted to buy CD players. Then suddenly it becomes mature and the performance becomes stronger. And when the cassette industry almost disappears, and obviously it has happened in my own lifetime, so I can tell you that I've seen this happen, and many of you in the here would have seen this happen. And then what happens, the MP3 starts to come in and CDs become discontinuous actually. And now all of you know it's the USB pen stick or really completely social media ways of trying to get music into it. So technologies always overlap. That's what we need to remember and understand. You will never find a technology that is actually very, very new. And the space is one of those examples which are very new technologies actually, because nobody is able to go to the space. So it's a very open market, very clear perspective. They can set the rules, they can identify, define, but very often that the same rules don't hold for principle that what to do. And there is always, because of this, there is always low investment, and driver for technologies are generating high high profits for their companies actually. And therefore, there is always a challenge of how to be able to. So, for example, if you want to now solve this problem, you cannot solve this problem unless you would have solved these problems as well, actually, on the way. And very often in research programs, you always try to solve the endpoint problem, actually. While what you really need to do is to solve an endpoint problem, one needs to go through these S curves of growth, which will fund and help into each other, and therefore carry out and catalyze these activities. And that's how most innovators are. For example, the Elon Musk story of telling, he talks about a taxi that can, you just walk in and sit there and sleep, and you'll reach some other place in 4 hours. You don't even have to worry about it, actually. And there are challenges and problems that already the San Francisco taxi that is facing in various aspects of life. But you can imagine how much of these kind of technologies are absolutely the pace and innovation that will vary over time is quite amazing and literally going to be at the breakneck speed. Because I showed you an example which happened 70 years back. Now, believe me, what will happen in 25 years is quite astonishing. And I'll try to give some explanation to these in later part of my slide. But another very important aspect of how to be able to analyze all these aspects is what is called capitalist dilemma, actually. Again, continuing from there. Largely, the innovations in the world are of only 3 kinds. You can group them in 3 different baskets, actually. The first one is what is called disruptive innovations. And that's what biotech industry is trying to do right now, actually. So what we're trying to do is we disrupt out the whole entire gamut of chain cycles of what the way it will happen. And therefore, these ones creates jobs, creates growth, and needs capital. And that's why you can see the 3 BioE3 policies really align with these kind of aspects. And that's an innovation that India rarely does. Very often we have missed out on these because it requires the capital that is non-existing in a way that one wants to invest, actually. However, what we do very, very well is sustaining innovations, actually. These makes goods products better. This is always the focus of management. It improves margins, gains market share. However, it creates little net growth. It does not really grow companies into a bigger, it only continues to, sustain them into higher and higher orbit, but you don't go into the next orbit, like from Moon to Mars, from Mars to Jupiter to something else. And that's where I think we need to really look at. And the third one is an efficiency innovation. And this is, you can take an example of Walmart, for example, all these corporates that people work with, you improve the efficiency of it. What this really ends up doing is eliminates jobs. However, increases the cash flow into the system, actually. So if you want to increase the number of jobs, because that's what the critical problem in a country like India is with the population that we have, you really have to focus on disruptive innovations. And that's the point that we put together in front of the government to convince them that we need to come up with futuristic policies that aligns people, society, capitalists, all the markets and scientific community to be able to put together their best possible stance to be able to make it happen. Now, along with this, the finances are always connected, actually. And the financial growth model, again, for the disruptive innovation has always struggled to attract capital and managerial attention. This is a common problem. It's a problem that is happening in every place. You will constantly say, who will fund mine? Who will do this for me? Why would government doesn't take care of it? Where is the money going to come from it? How do I convince managers to be able to do this? And this is always a struggle part, actually. And that's why people actually give up these very easily and move on to the second part of the life, which is, as I said, sustaining innovations. And here, the profitability matrices are always higher than those of disruptive innovations. And therefore, all the funders and people look at sustaining these, actually. And that's where, we need to create a kind of an environment where, and the third one, as I said, the profitability matrices for efficient innovation is always better than those of sustaining innovations. And therefore, you will see most managers in companies will try to work on this aspect of it. They'll improve it further, show better growth. They'll improve it further, show better growth. They'll improve it further, better growth, till the growth itself becomes inhibitory to its own growth, because it finally stops down, and then the company actually shows negative growth, actually, after that, because you have not adopted to disruptive innovations that are required to be able to carry out these activities. And these are not just, and these are very, very important things because to understand is because the impact of profitability and matrices used in resource allocation is always dependent on whether to go for this or this. And all investors will go for this and this rather than going for this actually. So how do we leverage this capacity by bringing government together, by bringing private investments together, by providing a bigger picture of the game is what is very, very critical to look at. However, one needs to be very, very careful of what models we use for this country's perspective actually, because it cannot be disruptive. And therefore, one of the other important law in this book that I'm not going to discuss today, but is very interesting to think about is law of wasting abundance actually, which in my opinion is true with venture capital funding in the United States actually. You can see it's always taken a numbers from there and said less than 5% or 10% of the startups actually succeed. Now, fantastic. If that's the model that you use, if you keep funding again and again same things that are likely to fail, you will have less successes. Now, the whole world believes that startup really has a chance of success only 1 in 10. And that's a very, very wrong perception to build in actually, because it is associated with law of wasting abundance. It's really true, as I'm trying to put together, if you really think of this from a perspective of research laboratories, all these theories in fact hold in research laboratories as well actually. For example, the easiest thing, if I give you more money from DBT, the first experiment that you will tell me will be an omics experiment. Very rarely it will be a thought experiment, it will be an omics. We can run this plot, we can do proteomics, we can do metabolomics, we can do. Now, this is absolutely a perspective of wasting abundance. One cannot invest continuously until and unless you reach a stupidity of wasting, where you almost appear yourself to be kind of a person who before thinking how to make use of money is what becomes a prior art of it actually. And that's where one needs to come up with models where how to sustain innovation and growth from a perspective that becomes very, very important to look at actually. And how do we really do this actually? And I think I always prefer, whenever I get stuck with something, is to really think of what have other countries done. And I think let's try and understand. Honorable Prime Minister says in next 25 years, India should be Viksit Bharat. Now, what are the parameters of Viksit Bharat? How many countries are Viksit if you really look at? And why a country, a question, what we call Viksit Bharat Sankalp, why a country with developing at such a fast rate economy finds it difficult to break into the ranks of rich nation. And you can see this is a rather interesting graph generated by World Bank about some time back in 2008 or 9 actually. It's called middle income trap. Now, this is a problem that countries which is low income to low to middle to low to high income, and the countries that become rich and staying rich. Now we see large number of countries get stuck into this middle income zone actually. Brazil, Russia, Mexico, China, all of them have tremendous amount of growth over the years actually. And believe me, if you really think of it, institutions have the same kind of problem. The problem is that you keep going back to the same old thing, what one have done to come from here to here. You want to extrapolate again from here to here, and you believe that that's the model for success actually. And that's where I think many promising economies have become ensnared in middle income mediocrity, what is called middle income trap actually. How do we come out of this? And I think one of the challenge for our country is really technologically empowered India can escape this trap, because we have a very, very different challenges and problems to look at than entire world. And one of the things that we need to emphasize on the fact is that different trajectory needed to leapfrog each quadrant. From this quadrant to this quadrant, or from this quadrant to this quadrant, it does not take the same thing what you have done earlier. So you need to change your behavior. You need to change your perspective. You need to change your programs. You need to think differently. And that's where science, society, industry, academia, everybody needs to come together and make this happen actually. Again, let me re-emphasize this fact by looking into the back part of the journey. I mean, it's always good to look at what has been happening. Can this be possible about? Now, this is a century-old diagrams that talks about various industrial revolutions that have happened actually. And you can see how technological evolution has shaped our society. And you can imagine, I give you an example of washing machine to, I suggested to you about space research actually. See what happened in the first industrial revolution around 1750. which happened in Britain and France, and it changed the world for it's the way it is actually. Then came the age of steam and railway engine in 18th century. Then in the 18th, late 19th, early 19th century came heavy engineering and age of steel engineering. Then there was the age of oil and automobile industry that appeared around 90s, mid 90s, when Ford and all made cars so cheap and so accessible, because this used to be rich people alike, that Ford converted into a completely new model. And then you imagine Toyota converted into even a better model. And eventually, what happens with this? And that's why I think this example of Japan is very, very interesting to look at. I think when you try and understand why Japanese economy is these days not doing very well, it's because of these three problems, innovation dilemmas that I talked to you about. If you look at Japanese had Toyota, had Honda, had Sony. All companies constantly innovated and created new volumes and new technologies. In the middle of 2000, what they did, they went into sustaining innovations or incremental efficiency innovations. They kept out same models of more of them. And therefore, the Kodak-like companies or these companies that had headquarters there, they started to collapse. And now you can see the Japanese economy is struggling to come out of it. So why countries, and this is the problem that comes with why innovations and industrial revolutions have to constantly be able to part of countries' manifesto to be able to take to the next level of research or to be able to next level of technological innovation. And all of you have seen the ICT revolution, actually. Of course, Anand gives you wonderful stories about how he initiated Persistent and how this transformed the whole economics of the country, actually. But this is something fantastic that we have seen. It's irreversible now, right? You can't imagine to go back to railway station and imagine stand in the queue and book railway tickets. It's impossible. These are irreversible changes that in human mind that happen. And believe me, the next 25 years would be the industrialization of biology, actually, of how harnessing biology will be the mainstay of all countries. Believe me, not only India, all countries. And that's how every aspect of life will be associated with it and will change with it, actually. And that's where I call bio-revolution is coming. Are we ready for it? Do we want to accept it? Do we want to be part of it? Or do we want to again be, on the conveyor belt so that everybody is moving ahead and you kind of be part of that journey? And that's where I think India has to become the leader on its own perspective. So what do we really need to do Viksit Bharat? And some landmark changes that what we want to look at. For example, Global Innovation Index, you just realized we're now 39th in the world. Can we be in the top 4th, actually, by 25 years? Can we have R&D investment of about 3.5%? Now you can imagine private industry R&D investment is very, very low in this country. Countries like US and Israel have 1.52% of it coming from a private industry. The Bharat origin entity is about 400, which is about then 2,500. And similarly, one can talk about that bioeconomy, actually, can it be, which is about 4% of the GDP now, can it be 15% of the GDP to look at, actually? And can we make it happen? And clearly, what one needs to focus on if one wants to have a stable country is create about jobs that are about 5 crore in numbers, actually. How do we do all of this? It's very easy as a research student to think of your project only. Believe me, as a younger person, you need to evolve as a much better scientist. The scientist is not the one who looks at their labs, looks at their problems, that those problems are very important. But it's the holistic growth of an individual that is very critical for a PhD, because 0.1% of the world decides what 99.9% does in this ever world, actually, time. And therefore, our PhD training, what we started with as an I3C program, is about you need to have a holistic education and research to make sure that one becomes a part of the country's journey of Viksit Bharat. And that's where each and one of you should feel proud that you are part of a national program of implementation that is part of your journey activities, actually. And so what are the twin tech transitions that we need to happen, actually? And I think these are the two most important for sustainable development. And obviously, one of them is a digital tech. Can we take digital tech into the entire country's every nook and corner part of the world? And second one is a green tech. And both these technological evolutions will completely change the dimensions of our country. If we can integrate them, it will be even better and make something completely dramatic happen. Obviously, what one needs to do is to integrate finance and technology development in this strategy. And to do that, what one needs to do is one needs to drive innovations, and these innovations needs to be deployed in the country such that it creates new opportunities. Because it's the feedback system that will allow the integration of finance to continue to work. Otherwise, if this does not grow, this thing will become stagnant. And that's how all of these are in fact interconnected networks that we need to work at. And institutions like NCCS often work at this part of the journey only. And you believe this is sufficient to do any of this activity. And that's where one of the points that I want to convince you is that the organizations have very different roles to play at different times in the world. And that's where it's very important to understand how you position yourself. Of course, not only for country's good, but for your own good as well. Because if you are part of that bigger picture, then you are always wanted and required to be making this happen, actually. And that's where I say that the Bharat needs to have its own growth model, actually. And you cannot copy paste what is happening in US. You cannot copy paste what is happening in Japan, where there is a demography as a very large number of older people, nor US venture capital ecosystem, fail early, invest lot. Now, what do you happen to that? You look at the pharma product. Every single pharma product that's coming out today is expensive than the previous one. And it's even limited to not many people who can utilize this as well. So why is this such a challenge, actually? Who is paying for it? You only pay for it. Nobody else pays for it because VCs make the money. All the companies, sell the product and gives it back to the people. The insurance companies pay it. Finally, it's the government who are subsidizing it in some way or other, actually. So one needs to create a model keeping in mind of our own country's demography, economics, and geographical realities. And I think the model that Indian government wants to emphasize and focus on is public-private partnership with the Indian industry partnership together, such that that becomes a vibrant model of a successful purpose, actually. It's easier said than done. And there are many things that can be done beyond. If you really look at this slide, actually, it's an interesting perspective of how we can propel India into becoming an innovative nation. If you look at startups right now in our country, we have startups. 1 in 10,000 right now is a startup in our country right now. In Israel, it is 1 in 2,000. In US, it is 1 in 4,000 number. So you can imagine with our 1.4 lakh startups, India has a potential to get 10x of number of startups, actually. And 1 million startups is what one can bring in. And with this 1 million startups, we can bring out about more jobs that are likely to happen. Now, often, as I said, people will say, oh, the startups fail. Oh, please try and understand the point. These are the most productive people. These are the people whom you should deploy and re-employ them in various aspects of life, actually, because they have gone through the whole purpose of taking things from one place to another place, actually. And I think that is where our India's model of startup ecosystem, we're already third largest in the world. But believe me, we can be the topmost country in terms of startups. We need to make it happen. We need to support them in different ways. And we need to provide every possible opportunity for younger people to aspire to open their own startups and carry out these activities in future to go. So how do we do this? And, one of the key aspects is academia is a very, very difficult journey to look at. And, I think I probably showed this poem last time as well somewhere, but I still like to talk about it primarily. Every time I come to NCCS, I remember Mohan Vani, with whom I had started working with buffaloes at that time. And, unfortunately, he's not here today, but such a wonderful man. And I still enjoy, because the academic ecosystem has to break its stereotype thought processes. That's the key. Believe me again, you are a part of national strategy that is why you call National Institute name actually associated with you. Not everybody is given national name for it, actually. Institutions have national agenda, and that is why they're given national names. And so I thought I will talk to you about that, how we get stereotyped and cannot come out of our own zones by looking at this Hindi poem, which is called Bhains Ki Gatha Bhains Ki Jaban Se, actually. And it says, जब बच्चा थोड़ा बड़ा होता है तो दूध मेरा पीता है, वो भी बोनमीटा डाल डाल कर, और निबंध लिखने के लिए गाय, हाथी या कुत्ते क्यों. So if you really look at, you've never written a essay on bhains, right? It's always treated very, very poorly, actually. And then you say, अगर कोई बच्चा लिख नहीं पाता है तो बोलते हैं काला अक्षर भैंस बराबर. तो क्या दूसरे जानवर पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट है? You know, what is that poor animal has done? But all the bad things are associated with this. And the stereotype mind allows us to label these people differently. If you then look at यदि कोई गलती करे तो कहते हैं गई भैंस पानी में, तो क्या बाकी के लोग कोका कोला में जाते हैं? और कोई नहीं सुने तो कहते हैं भैंस के आगे बीन बजाना, बाकी के आगे क्या लता मंगेशकर का गाना बजाते हैं, क्या बिगाड़ा है मैंने? So you can imagine stereotype lives have these challenges and problems to look at. If you try and come up with any muhavara that is for good for bhais, I think we should celebrate that, because everything that is associated with this poor person, poor animal, which takes care of so much of our life, is always in a way that is actually thought to be detrimental to its own cause. Believe me, this is a stereotype thought process. The stereotype thought processes creates more challenges and problems to look at. So come back to how do we solve global challenges actually, and can India lead the world? And believe me, every world is looking up to India, how India is going to set directions for future of the world, because of its huge population, because of its democracy, because of its vibrancy, and because of its amazing set of people and talent that we have in our country. Can we solve problems that are larger than lives? Can we take up challenges that are larger than what one can think of? These are climate change, unsustainable material consumption, and waste generation. And all of you would agree, you cannot solve it on your own. One can really make no impactful difference. But we all want to do this actually. And we can all want to do this, but we all want to be part of this journey. And primarily, one of the biggest challenges in all of this is understanding the end of life cycle assessment of everything that you do. How is the life cycle of whatever you do is going to be happening work with actually. I just give you one example just to tell you the cloth, if you really look at. The cloth was in India 25 years back, is only for essential work. Now you look at, I don't know, in the campus, your Amazon teams must be, couriers must be coming every day with number of packets of textile that are brought in numbers now. And you can imagine what is done in the cloth. The cloth industry has become so cheap, so viable, so opposite, that it's now not a essential, but it's a commodity now. You want to flaunt good cloths as a part of your life, but what is an outcome of it? It has no end of life cycle. You don't know what to do with it. You can create blankets, you can do whatever you want to do, but that's not sufficient to look at. And you see what people does. This Char Dham pilgrims discard garments in the river, and 7 quintal fished out in more than 2 months, less than 2 months about. So you can imagine people find it easy to discard it than to carry it somewhere else. And that's what the cost does to the programs and technologies. You bring down the efficiency, you bring down the cost, it actually gets into other problems and challenges. So how do we solve all these challenges and problems? And several of these are actually very important to look at. The other very important problem that India wants to solve, and you have to remember these, and this is particularly for younger students, because if you don't understand what are the challenges and problems you're going to face, you cannot build your careers. You think you can build your careers by getting a PhD and understanding a postdoc. That's insufficient in today's world. You want to be an innovator, and you want to be taking challenges and understand challenges prior to their resolved actually. And this is one of the biggest challenges in India, believe me, if you really look at. What are these graphs showing? You look at countries like South Korea, United States, Brazil, and the number of people employed in the agriculture sector. It's all single digit, less than 10% of the people deployed in agriculture sector. You look at what China and India employs. India has about 42% of the people in agriculture sector. Do you think food and agriculture, the most essential component of human life, will survive like this? It will not survive. You will have to find these people, to find new jobs such that the numbers come down, and such that if we want to become Viksit Bharat, if we want to become Viksit Bharat, if we want to become efficient in our food generation processes, in our ability to be able to do this, you will have to find enormous number of jobs for people who will not want to do agriculture work, and will have to find alternate ways of doing it actually. How do we do this? And where do we create these jobs for a country of this size to be able to look at? And again, give you some examples to be able to tell you how the challenges and problems are not stationary. They always come in an S-shaped curve. You find a challenge, you solve a problem, and then a new challenge again appears immediately. And then, so how these technological revolutions have to be constantly, entangled such that you continue to resolve these problems and challenges. So you look at the bioeconomy of the country actually with respect to their GDPs. You see the countries like France, Italy, Spain, smaller countries, or South Korea, their bioeconomy is already in the double-digit numbers to their GDPs actually. And what that tells you is that countries like larger diversified GDPs economies like USA and China that are very diverse economies actually, there are 4 and 5% only actually. Same with India. India is a diverse economy because we're large countries. The smaller countries focus on bioeconomy as a way because they are very, very capable and they can only work on one model. So clearly you can imagine that these numbers, all these countries will grow up. And you can see China and USA enormously investing in biomanufacturing right now. Enormous. Every focus on these countries is how to use biotech innovations and bring them to the market such that they're sustainable, they're innovative, and they're going to solve futuristic problems actually. And that's the only way one can look at this part. What is Indian bioeconomy right now? If you look at the bioeconomy report that BIRAC and DBT releases every year actually, we've now moved from 2020, which was about $85 billion industry, to about $151 billion industry in 3 years. So it's really good actually. It's amazing that our growth has been doubled in less than 3 to 4 years. What we believe is there will be $300 billion industry by 2030, and that's what expected out of us for various aspects of things. So I'll not go into the details of various sectors, but how you should understand institutions and government play a very, very critical role in making this happen. It does not happen by chance. Believe me, many of you think that many of these things can happen on its own. There is organic growth, but the organic growth also requires a design. And this design perspective is what Department of Biotechnology over the years, various leaderships have played actually. You can see when Department of Biotechnology started in 1986, capacity building was the most important perspective actually. Then it moved to cutting edge research, then innovation. In 2014, Department of Biotechnology started and charged the BIRAC system actually, where the entrepreneurship was one of the most novel theme. Now it's very common in every ministry to look at it. But because of these hundreds of bio incubators that you have everywhere in the country, that startup could grow. And now what we are focusing on is the bioeconomy perspective for the country actually. And therefore we call DBT now as delivering a better tomorrow to you. And so how do we really do this, and how institutionalizing these problems and challenges really help? As I said, BIRAC was set up in 2012 to enable ecosystem of industrial development and entrepreneurship. In 2014, it was energized. What are we doing in the present times? What we have done as an organization? We've now build a knowledge network of Biotechnology Research Innovation Council, which is actually a larger body than just 28 or 30 or 45 faculties of NCCS or there. Is to create a knowledge network of DBT research institutions that will enhance and implement the transformative power of S&T for benefit of all. Can we, for this country and for the world, set up new agendas of what biotechnology should do? That's the challenge for an S&T innovation ecosystem is. It's not incremental advancement. It's not sustaining efficiency. It's not trying to do this. Can we have these bold decisions so that about 400 scientists and more than 1,200 PhD students, believe me, it's an amazing powerhouse of 1,250 PhD students together, what they can bring into this innovation ecosystem. What we are planning to do, which is also at NCCS has taken a lead in this, is to set up biomolecular bioenabler hubs actually, which will catalyze green growth, where various biomanufacturing and biofoundries will be set up actually to be able to do these activities. And finally, we will set up bio-innovation parks actually all across the country in at least 4 zones, which will fast forward furthering of new businesses that will put together the industry, academia, partnerships in a kind of zones that are like, for example, in their Oxford University or Leiden University, or for example, the Cambridge innovation ecosystem where every day people say 1,000 companies actually start and fold. Can we create an ecosystem that actually supports these activities? And all of you have to be part of this journey. Without this cannot happen actually. And that's why it's very, very critical and important. So coming back to BioE3 actually, Honorable Prime Minister chaired this meeting and approved this BioE3 policy on August 24, 2024 actually. And again, we can call this as a initiation of bioeconomy growth in the country. It provides a framework that gives directions for future scientific, industrial, and societal advancement. It's a commitment for foster and advance sustainable, innovative, and responsive global challenges. The most important is Bharat to be among the global leader of next industrial revolution. And then can we create more jobs and intensify entrepreneurial momentum actually? And if you need to know a little bit more, we can discuss how we want to do this, but maybe obviously one of the key aspects of, and this is what the strategic roadmap is. Can we pick up specific sectorial because each sector require its own growth? So for example, bio-based chemicals and enzymes, functional foods and smart proteins, precision biotherapeutics, climate resilient agriculture, carbon capture and utilization, and futuristic marine and advanced space research actually. All of these will be done through public-private partnership and industrial collaborations by setting up bio-artificial intelligence hubs and biomanufacturing hub, doing skilling and doing regulatory environment. So this one slide gives you the total strategic roadmap that we want to do for the biotech ecosystem actually. And believe me, this is what the country aspires for and expects the innovators like you to participate in as much as possible to look at. What are the problems look at and how can we define the problems? One of the challenges always in human life is, can we identify problems and say, what do we want to work with? Okay, you say this is what we should do. Can we define them? And therefore, I like to put together for a security of any country beyond us army and looking at borders, you really have to secure agri-food, energy, chemicals, health, and climate change. These are the tech solutions that require for future security of the country. Any non-strategic sector, you cannot think beyond these four growths, and they require disruptive innovations of different kinds that will carry out. And why this is possible to do right now? This is possible because synthetic bioengineering now has reached completely new milestones. What I used to do in my lab used to take months to do it. All of you can do this in a day's time or 2 days' time right now. Actually, it's amazing now what has transformed. And obviously, this will get coupled with precision rather than fermentation. I like to call biomentation actually, for the lack of better word actually, because the fermentation really goes to a very narrow zone of themes. But biomentation is probably customized productive organisms and intelligent bioprocesses across every aspect of life. Now, what are the problems look at? And I think, believe me, the biology will build the next technology frontier. It will impact every part of food, water, energy, environment, plants, animal, humans. And this in combination of AI and biotech and other sectors will reshape the life exactly the way the IT industry revolutionized the 1990s. So let me give you some problems and then end my talk. I think I've already exceeded some 5 minutes of my time right now. So what is the critical and the most critical component if you really look at? It's the energy, right? The energy sector drives every single aspect of human life. Now, what is the present biorefinery exists actually in our country, if you look at? And this is help from Ashish, actually, who provided me with some critical information in this slide, actually. And this is also published in a paper, so it's not my hypothetical stories, believe me. This picture is taken up from a Nature article in 2024, how world is looking at it, actually. And I'm only trying to say India needs to do it in a slightly different model. So what is happening today? If you suppose this is a refinery now, and this refinery produces about 150,000 barrels per day, every day of oil, which is required to produce petrol, diesel, jet fuel, and polymers and denatures. These are his outputs. What are his inputs? The inputs are oil, crude oil, which is all imported, and then 14% of it is from whatever India, other aspects that we built in actually. And most of it is imported, part of it. Now, can we convert this into where the input mass itself changes into a completely different ecosystem? And one of the most possible way, in my opinion, is the plastic waste actually. So 25% of plastic waste, and all of you who are aware of chemistry and biology will say it's a carbon atom. Plastic is nothing but carbon atom. And fuel is nothing but the carbon atom that is involved in different aspects. So can we now take plastic and convert every plastic into oil? Similarly, the biomass that is available in the country, which is now getting used for various purposes, and then the carbon dioxide can be captured from these places to be able to look at from industry to be able to do. Can we make this as an input so that our dependency on oil and the fossil fuel almost disappears in 25 years to come? The challenge is, who will fund these refineries? The present refineries are not going to fund it because those already have a profit-making businesses. So how do we really make it happen? And there was the role of government and other partners come in actually. And you can see what I've tried to do here is remove the petrol from here, almost everything, which was because you can imagine that EVs and green hydrogen will become a mobility part of human smaller traffic vehicles for sure actually. And these polymers and chemicals, because of the material world, will increase in numbers, and they will then again feed back into the input ecosystem such that this really becomes a model of circular economy. And this is possible because of this challenge actually. And this is the 350 million tons of carbon is the form of fossil energy we import. It released this 2.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide in emission, and 450 million tons of carbonaceous resources wasted actually. So all of this together tells you that we can make energy transition happen in this country. If we can do this, we can really change every paradigm cycle of what the world is talking of, looking at us actually. But if we do this, then what will happen to the chemical industry? Because petrochemical industry feeds into the intermediate chemicals that produces all the part of the material world actually. So it produces about 60,000 to 70,000 molecules in all these sectors: agro, poultry, chemical, dyes and pigments, food and additives, pharma, construction chemicals, water treatment chemicals, home care ingredients, and the list goes on. You can imagine every part of your life is by molecules that are coming from chemical industry in the country. And it's a completely deregulated industry, mind you. That's the reason why it has grown such big, and it's very hard to ablate now and change it into a different form. So how do we really do this? But if we now change the petrochemical industry, these intermediates will all start to become very expensive, and every single material will become even more expensive for you to look at. So therefore, one needs to actually, rather than petrochemical industry, one needs to put it out and to say, can the agri-crop waste, landmine, municipal waste, and industry pollutants start producing either the intermediates or start producing chemicals directly from a way which will use all sorts of biomass-derived feedstock into a circular economy model. So everything is integrated in this world. And therefore, you cannot keep pieces, only one piece of inventions, and not think about the second piece of invention to look at it actually. And I think this is where the world has very, very complex place to really do innovation ecosystem, as we talked about. This is a problem that I thought I will convey to the agriculture challenges actually. All of you will hear about MSP, government MSP. Farmers sit on the streets, talk about minimum standard for retail price, whatever they want for. Now, why do they ask for it? They ask for it when they don't get enough price from the market. Correct? If I'm able to sell at a higher price, I don't want minimum price to be taken by the government to buy from you actually, structured one. Now, this is a wonderful example to look at. We are one of the country that is actually exporting 87% of world castor oil is exported. We produce 65% of castor oil in Gujarat and Rajasthan and other places of the country. Now, what is happening is China, US, France, Netherlands, South Korea are the largest importers of this right now. And what they do is they've used these oil and convert it into industrial rubber and send it back to us. And we import all of these. Now, what they are trying to do to look at their import supply, what China is doing is manufacturing castor oil through a sustainable biomanufacturing methods actually. So can you now start producing oil itself in the microbial route such that you don't have to depend on agri growth any longer? Now, what will happen because of this? What will happen because of this is in 5 years' time, this technology will become viable. Once this technology becomes viable, the export price that our farmers get will actually diminish. Then these farmers are going to go and start doing strike. They're going to stay, give us more money. Government is not looking at it. We need to be supported. What government can do? Government can provide subsidy to them. Now, if every now and then government is going to continue to provide subsidies after subsidies, you actually get into what is called middle income trap. Because you go back to the same old challenges. Government is presently subsidizing urea for every farmer to an extent that is about 2 lakh or $10,000 of 10 crores of rupees, actually 10,000 crores of rupees of subsidies given for them to buy urea fertilizers actually. Now, how do we really solve these challenges and problems? If we continue this, we will continue the same model of growth and problems to look at. And I'll show you another problem which is actually very much relevant and easy to understand. And this is the milk problem. Milk, eggs, and food actually. When you look at Again, India is a very large, 25% of the world milk is produced in India, largest producer in the country. We have a very, very large production of milk in the country. Of course, so it's produced in this kind. Now human population is about 1376 million, and the per capita availability is 459 grams per day. You can imagine, despite having so much of milk products, our consumption per person, if you want to look at, is only 459 grams. Now, if this population is going to increase, what will happen to the milk availability? You can imagine. The milk prices are going to go up. All the people are going to say, can we get more milk? Of course we can get more milk. How can we get more milk? Is increasing the livestock, right? That's the most easiest problem to look at. Now imagine what is our livestock in the country is. The 20th livestock census in the country, more than 300 million bovines, cattle, buffalo, methuen and yak is there in our country. 75 million sheep, 150 million goats, 9 million pigs, and the poultry is about 850 million poultry. Can you imagine what size and scales of this poultry is actually veterinary systems are there? Now, if one wants to increase their number, we have a problem of scarcity of land, water, antibiotic resistance, cost of feed, and GHG impact. Who is going to pay for this? So the model is, you can never increase the production of milk beyond what we have, whatever you do, believe me. But our cheese consumption is going up, our milk product consumption is going up, our milk products are going to come in very different models. Now, how are we going to sustain it? This is the problem that is critical for government to start addressing challenges before the problem becomes severe. Now, what is the solution for it? And obviously the solution is biomanufacturing, because milk is nothing but a formulation of proteins and other ingredients. And we are all from a pharma sector, we understand what formulations are. These are two proteins that are expressed in larger amounts, and you can convert it into it. And you can see these are 3 Indian NRIs who set up this factory Perfect Day called in Bangalore, and in fact are now bought over by a venture capital from US. And obviously what they will do is eventually they'll make this business viable and start selling us non-dairy milk. Now, these are the kind of critical challenges, and same things will happen with egg, milk, dairy. For a country of this size, we will always have abundance, will always not be there. We will always be worrying about our nitty-gritty. And if we worry about nitty-gritty, we can never solve bigger challenges. So therefore, we need to solve our own nitty-gritty problems by solving critical solutions. And therefore, there is no other option but to use biological routes, biomanufacturing processes to create industries and innovations that is of unprecedented value and really change that one can look at. And therefore, I thought I will show you the problems really, so that, you imagine the problems. And I think it's very, very easy to get embedded in some smallish problems of your lives. But there are bigger problems and country looks at, and it's trying to understand and focus on it actually. So I think this is what our Department of Biotechnology is trying to do, is trying to set up a biovision for Viksit Bharat. And in the end, I'll skip this, because I think it's already now too much. But in the end, I just want to talk about BRIC actually. And this is because all of us are part of it actually. And it's important to have one slide on what Biotechnology Research Innovation Council has to remodel and why is it has to remodel. Because if you look at pre-Amrit Kal, the genesis of every institution, including the founder director of this, was pursuit of knowledge, creating infrastructure, and capacity building. And these were the primary criteria with which, the founders of this, Dr. Wagh, set up these institutions. What is government asking you to do? In the evolving landscape, science and technology wants to be the critical driver of societal progress. How can you be the critical driver of societal progress? You want to drive society. That's not what our main purpose was. That's not what we were set up for. You cannot be the catalyst of change and development just like that unless you transform yourself. You look up into ways that are completely unique and novel to look at actually. And that's where I believe that Biotechnology Research Innovation Council will play a dominating role in changing the landscape of the country, will play a dominating role. And I can guarantee this actually. However, it requires participation, it requires enthusiasm, and people like you to put together, to implement what I call bold global actions that will define not just India, but the entire world's ecosystem. It's not very easy to do this actually, and I'll leave you with a small parable actually. That is of one of my favorite parable, which is actually taken from Venn Dyer's lab. It's a very interesting parable. It's about two twins in the mother's womb talking to one another. And I'll read it for you because it's a little bit small, but if you have, you can read this book actually. It's a very nice book actually. It talks about in a mother's womb were two babies. One asked the other, "Do you believe in the life after delivery?" The other replied, "Why? Of course, has to be something after delivery. Maybe we are here to prepare ourselves for what we will be later." "Nonsense," said the first. "There is no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but there'll be more light than here. Maybe we will walk with our legs and eat from our mouths. Maybe we will have other senses that we can't understand now." The first replied, "That is absurd. Walking is impossible and eating with our mouths, ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies nutrition and everything we need, but the umbilical cord is so short, life after delivery is to be logically excluded." Just imagine the thought process actually, right? And we know the outcomes of these actually. Now the other says, second insisted, "Well, I think there is something and maybe it's different than it is. Maybe we won't need this physical cord anymore." The first replied, and you can see it's very intuitive actually. "Nonsense. And moreover, if there is life, then why has no one ever come back from there?" Just imagine like the truth of life actually, right? Delivery is the end of life. And in and after delivery, there's nothing else but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere. "Well, I don't know," said the second, "but certainly we will meet mother and she will take care of us." The first replied, "Mother? You actually believe in mother? That's laughable. If mother exists, then where is she now?" The second said, "She's all around us. We are surrounded by her. We are of her. It is her that we live. Without her, this world would not exist." Said the first, "Well, I don't see her, so it's so logical that I doesn't exist actually." To which the second replied, "Sometimes when you're in silence and you're focused, you really listen, you can perceive her presence and you can hear the loving voice calling down from above." And you can imagine, it's an amazing parable of what one can think of actually. And I always say that practice to perceive unseen prospects in human endeavors are very difficult. Very difficult. It requires it's a very nice understanding between two young children who are yet to be born. But look at their discussions. And that's why many of you, if you think that what I'm talking about is not going to be possible, change your mind. Learn to practice to perceive what I call unseen prospects and contribute to the future of life. I'll leave you with the what Honorable Prime Minister talked about biotech ecosystem at the CEO meeting of in the US in the New York recently, and you can hear what he is also talking about actually.
आज भारत तेजी से ग्लोबल बायोटेक पावर हाउस के रूप में जैसा आप सब जानते हैं कहा भारत में बायो फार्मा रिसर्च प्रमोट करने के लिए एक फर्टाइल इकोसिस्टम भारत में बड़ी संख्या में साइंटिफिक टैलेंट तो है ही है। भारत का बड़ा और डाइवर्स जीन पूल भी भारत की विशालता और विविधता ये मैं समझता हूँ वहां एक बार कोई चीज पायोनियर रही है और उसमें प्रयोग हुए हैं तो वो दुनिया में कहीं पर भी तो लागू हो सकती है। इतनी विशालता और विविधता वहां बड़ी बड़ी है। एफोर्डेबल रिसर्च की पॉसिबिलिटी भी है और अफोर्डेबल मैन्युफैक्चरिंग और एश्योर क्वालिटी भी है। बायो सुपर एड जो कैपेसिटी गैप क्रिएट होगा भारत उसे ट्रस्टेड और एफिशिएंट तरीके से पूरा कर सकता है। बायो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को बूस्ट करने के लिए हम बायो ई3 पॉलिसी लेकर आए हैं। आपके साथ ध्यान आया होगा पिछले सप्ताह ही मैंने मेरी कैबिनेट में बायो ई3 की पॉलिसी हम लेके आए और फ्यूचरिस्टिक पॉलिसी हमने बनाई है। बायो ई3 यानी बायोटेक्नोलॉजी फॉर इकोनॉमी, एम्प्लॉयमेंट एंड एनवायरनमेंट, इन तीनों चीजों को लेकर मैंने बायो ई3 पॉलिसी को बना दिया है। 2030 में भारत की बायो इकोनॉमी बढ़कर $300 बिलियन की होने की हम संभावना देखते हैं। 2025 तक भारत में 10,000 से ज्यादा मारो स्टार्टअप की संभावना में देख रहा हूँ, जिसके कारण आप कल्पना कर सकते हैं ग्रास लेवल पर कितने बड़े काम की संभावना इस बायो के सेक्टर में भी होने की संभावना। हमारा लक्ष्य है कि हेल्थ सिक्योरिटी और ग्लोबल चैलेंज के सॉल्यूशन देने में भारत लीडरशिप के रोल में, और इसमें आप सबका सहयोग बहुत बड़ी ताकत है।
So I think you can see Honorable Prime Minister asking your support in all these endeavors, and my request to all of you is to take this इसको कहते हैं मुहिम आगे बढ़ाइए and make sure that India becomes Viksit Bharat. I think I'll stop here with this. Thank you all of you for this, and I think Mr. Wagh, I have great respects to him for whatever he's done. Thank you, Shamila, for this.
A wonderful talk, Rajesh. I really enjoyed it. I was just wondering what is the scale of investment we are thinking? Because you did mention the very first slide that we need capital for this whole journey. So what is the scale of investment that TBT India is thinking about?
I mean, I think this is one of the key aspects. As I said, financial gets completely integrated system, and government has given us 2 years time to set out for 1,500 crores as a way of activities, which is quite a magnificent activity. That's good. But it's not only government funding; it's the funding that one needs to mobilize from private sectors, from various people, and that's not. There is so much of money in the market right now. I don't know how many. I mean, Anand was just mentioning to the amount of various security deposits that is changing in our country. For example, you look at. I mean, it's amazing if you really think of what is happening in India right now. I mean, I can talk about the financial sector, about how banks are going to go into a very different success stories, because they themselves are struggling to survive because nobody keeps money in anymore in banks. And the classical task of bank was to really give loans and work with them. It's been done away by a different kind of securities. So I think money is not a problem. Believe me. I think that's the last problem in India, the money. There's so much of money existing that is floating around and circling. It's really our capacity to innovate and be able to take it up. Right? Government is always willing. I mean, this is like they're only giving it for 2 years. I don't think it can be better than this. And believe me, we are going to fund now, I mean, about 10 programs, biomanufacturing. We need to show them successes. Money will come. I don't think money is at all a problem. I think it's one of the component, but it's not the critical component.
So what, in your opinion, are the challenges that we are going to face?
But the real challenges, if you really look at, and then if you really want, I can just show you the slide that I had put up actually. How do we integrate? The first part is the key. How do we integrate bioeconomy into academic research, economic, industrial, and green plans? That's the key perspective. Because until and unless people at NCCS or NCL or institutions like ICER understand the importance of it, the innovation ecosystem is not going to grow. You have to ask people to grow this innovation ecosystem, and that's where I call integration into this. The leverage and mobilize finance is the second aspect of it. If you have technologies available, you will find buyers. What is the big deal about it? That's always happens, right? But if you don't have anything to ask for, what will you? And the incremental innovations actually doesn't succeed. Everybody will really very quickly say, oh, let's add on this. It will be very good. Like, for example, classical pharma, right? You look at Me Too pharma businesses, right? I mean, all of us know this. Every same model will be screened in every other pharma. And they think that we will come up with a molecule that is better than other. Imagine, this is stupidity, right, of a kind. But everybody believes a safe world, actually. And I think this is where important aspect to look. And obviously, one needs to have biomass as a sustainable mode. The livelihood has to be connected with the equity outcomes, actually, as I said. Because if we don't take livelihood as an important perspective, and that is where I believe that as a PhD student, I was never exposed to these part of lives. You're never exposed to it. We are only said, this is my problem, and that is a problem or a project. It's not even a problem. You work on a project. And that's where this I3C PhD program is only looking at. We're at least telling them to look at the problem. And then every month, like there are innovators who go and meet with them actually and talk to them about, how outcomes are very, very important and not just about, doing things about in your lives. So it's all these integrations are critical. They are the key. Society agrees, everything will change. It's dramatically, it will change, believe me. The finance will always be there because everybody is looking at to make money, right? If I tell you $300 billion industry in next 4 years, who doesn't want to invest? Everybody is going to be investing, right, in the retail economy. So it's not the big challenge right now. Thank you, Anu, for that.
Rajesh, fantastic talk, very inspiring. I'm sure all the students here will be very inspired. Let's take a quick question from somebody who tries to manage institutions. To face such challenges and to take such ambitious goals forward, do you think legacy institutions, whether industry or academia, are sufficient to do something like this, such a transition of such scale and ambition? And it's clear that the whole startup ecosystem has emerged because there was a clear gap to drive this. But the current ecosystem, it involves the legacy institutions, as I call them, the industry outlook that exists today, and the startup ecosystem that is just blooming. Is that still enough, or do we need something?
I think it's a very good question actually. How do we really change the legacy institutions? And I think our institutions, at least I can say that several of BBT institutions have undergone several rounds of transformations in their own way. For example, what Dr. Bonde would remember actually his science and what institution today is. They have renovated and they have changed themselves. Challenge in some institutions is really to do leapfrog. Right? I mean, you cannot do these incremental changes and allow things to happen. I really think that beginning new ones again is not terribly easy. However, you need to create new zones of institutions from people who are willing to be participating in this. Like for example, NCL and NCCS, if I look at it, not everybody probably will be willing because of their own ways of. It's not that they are not wanting to do. It's just that they don't think they are capable enough. They don't think they have time enough. They don't think many things. So I think these institutions within some zones should create new networks. Because if you don't use older networks, then the new networks to set up will take again very long time to happen. So you need to create these. And in fact, that's where I believe that the BRIC, which is actually a kind of a synthetic institute, not really an institute from a point of view, because it's more like but what you bring into it is what is critical. No, never ever, for example, since I was part of CSI, I can tell you that, and Shekhar sitting there as well, actually, spent 7.5 years. Who CSR labs feel integrated? Nobody did, even though there was an NCL IIT program, and I remember with Shriram there, actually, I used to visit NCL so many times, actually. You can't talk to each other. You need to create programs that are networked. What we're trying to do right now is, for example, hiring 100 faculties to create units that are already existing in these and get recruitment in these people. So the PhD program that we talk about, all students are now getting trained at one place. 70 students will get trained, and I would prefer 200 students, but the capacity doesn't go that rapidly. If you have these, they will go back to all these individual labs. They are already pre-connected for 6 months. So in a short period of time, you have 500 students connected like this to various batches. They will transform institutions because their connections will drive new things to happen. I don't see there is enough time to set up new institutions.
And for me, the time access is very, very little. Time to target is, you are the master of this as well, actually. You always emphasize how time to target is critical. For me also, time to target is critical. If you miss the bus today, you will not be part of industrial revolution. You will be late in the industrial revolution. So many of these students, faculties, postdocs, in fact, have to retrain themselves. I think this, as you rightly said, how many want to do it, but I think Shekhar has the answer, easy answer for it.
No, thank you. I don't have any answer. Brilliant talk. Thanks for that. I agree with most of it. The differences we discussed offline. The issue that we face today, one of the issues is that Indian academia is quite disconnected with Indian industry. And as you correctly pointed out, that industry doesn't spend enough money on R&D in India. So the challenge before us is how do we change this? The way bureaucracy looks at industry academia collaborations, it's very, very difficult for either the academia to approach industry or industry to approach academia and work together to solve common problems. And what would be your view? How do we change that particular mindset for both industry and business?
Always a very prophetic question. Anyway, I personally believe, we should not care too much about all this bureaucracy. To be very frank, if IT industry was, they knew bureaucracy, knew how exactly the IT software programming was, the technology licensing was going on. I don't think it would have happened the way. Anand is the best person to answer that. Of course, there are policy guidelines available. But if you look at for the IIT Madras, to look at innovation ecosystem, right? I don't know how many have a chance to look at it. Can government stop that from happening right now? Because it has an industry on capital. I think we should make it very big so that it's not able to, you make it small unit, then there are people who patthar maar ke ek shisha tod dete hain. Usse lagta hai ki kuch gir gaya hai karke, wo bhi kuch rehta hai for time ke liye. So all trivial matters, right? And those will continue in life because that's a part and parcel of it. But if you make bigger enterprises and make bigger challenges, for example, CSI, small mandates to really work with industry at the scale that is not really understood by many of scientific communities. I don't think industry is ever so keen. Right? Believe me, I've never seen industry more keener to participate in these activities than I have ever seen them. Of course, you go there and you tell them, we are also stupid and fools, right? I mean, you think they are going to put in money to you because you're asking them. I think it's an interaction, it's an ability to convince and to be able to make them believe that we all being together in this journey and there are good conversations and good directionalities. And I think it will change. I think we should not. You look at what other ministries are doing, believe me. 1 lakh crore that the AI mission has been given. 1,000 crore, sorry, not 1 lakh crore. 1,000 crore that AI mission has. They are deploying it everywhere. Right? If you go and ask whether can I do it, then they'll obviously say don't do it. Just do it in order to matter. What are we doing it for? Finally, nothing. At the end of the day, the tax is being paid by the private industry to the government. It goes nowhere. That's the biggest contribution. I really think should not overemphasize on this aspect of it. I think we should just start and do things. I don't see any other problem. I don't think government will come up with the guidelines and say, because on 18th there is a meeting by PM Stites meeting on understanding what are the models that every sector needs to look at for public private partnership sectors. These are discussions. Discussions to come as a part of be able to solution making. It's not good. There is no other way out. And I always believe that if there is nothing else to know the solution, what else will you do? So I think it will bound to happen. Shekhar, your role will be very critical.
Wonderful talk. Thank you very much. One aspect of innovation is to have it as market-driven innovation, which is what you're trying to do. And the flip side of it is protection for intellectual property and patents. We have fantastic research institutions which have not been encouraged to file for patents. Only recently that's happening. Once you file for patents, copyrights, etc., the legal system takes over for implementation. That's a big lacuna. I don't think we can find an answer for that here, but that's an area that needs some thought. Thank you.
I think it's a very important point actually, and I think as a country we should look at patent protection in a very different way. Primarily, most of our patents are coming from government funded money. Therefore, protectionism should be really looked at in a very different model. I believe though some of the open source models are very, very critical to look at. Of course, industry is also patenting. For example, in West, you can see most of the patents are done by Samsung and others. In the present time, IBM used to be the leader. It's still the leader of all the patents holding. So companies can maintain that, but I think government institutions should patent and should make it more wider accessible to people. But you're right. I mean, this is one of the key perspective to look at. I think there are many, and I think the coordinated framework of these regulatory perspective also is critical in biotech ecosystem as well. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up.
Student of Dr. Wagh, as you rightly say, the correct contact and collaborate will be the future. But unless we collaborate, we cannot do anything. So from NCCS after retirement, I went to Manipal University. Then I got the DY Patil. We also established a stem cell lab. And now we also got one startup company. So that is the future, as you rightly say, and that should sustain. So I really contributed for all this excellent talk on the opinion of Dr. Wagh's.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please.
Hello, sir. I again enjoyed the talk. What I wanted to ask was, you mentioned the S curve of growth. So, what aspects of biotechnology on the Indian scene do you see at the start of the S curve? Like, as a part of the younger people of the ecosystem, what aspects do we look forward to?
I thought I gave 3 examples, very clear examples of, for example, can we convert plastic into every plastic, convert it back into oil, right? Can we make manufacture food products through our own biomanufacturing process? Can we convert the chemical industry into a feedstock-based industry? There are problems of S curve, right? I mean, the industry will not be willing to change their economic perspective because transformational changes require a lot of capital investment and labor. But these are the critical problems. Obviously, I haven't talked about biopharma, but there's one of the key aspects is 7 gene therapy areas will actually be completely very, very transformative once Indian cost manufacturing comes. I think we built our own S curve, and I think it requires a little bit better clear understanding for very specific details for each technology. Right. Thank you.
I would like to request Dr. Bapat to please felicitate Dr. Gokhale on behalf of NCCS. It is my pleasure to propose the vote of thanks on behalf of NCCS. I would like to start by thanking Dr. Gokhale for sharing a very insightful perspective on and overview of the BioE3 policy, and also sharing the big picture DBT's vision for a Viksit Bharat. We at NCCS look forward to supporting this vision by leveraging our expertise and aligning our endeavors with the current and contemporary societal needs. So thank you, Dr. Gokhale, for squeezing us into your very busy schedule. Thank you also, Dr. Alka Sharma. We are very grateful that you spent time to visit us today and give a very interesting talk in the morning. I would next, we have friends and colleagues who have joined us from other organizations. We are very grateful to all the leadership and other dignitaries from other organizations who have joined us, including Dr. Anand Deshpande, Professor Bhagwat, Dr. Lele. I hope I have not missed out any names. Thank you also Dr. G.C. Mishra, Dr. Mande, and all other former faculty members, Dr. Bogli, former faculty members of NCCS. We are very grateful to all other friends and colleagues from other organizations who have joined us and made this day very special for us. And thank you to all the NCCS members also for joining in. Thank you very much. Can you just switch this?